So blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. And don't forget the KIDO Talk Radio app. It is free. It's on the App Store and Google Play. Along with our newsletter, more information, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com. We go to Cassie Smedley joining us from the Republican National Committee. Cassie, good to have you with us.
Hi, Kevin. Good to be with you.
Boy, how crazy has it been these past few days? It seems like weeks, the endless criticism of the president, the profanity used by so many of the Democratic presidential candidates, if you will. It's just been crazy, the reaction to these tragedies.
Yes, it's really a little bit of a twilight zone. I mean, there was a time when you'd have a tragedy and everybody would just sort of lay off for a couple of days and give people the time to mourn and the nation the time to unite and heal. And then we would start talking about where we should go from here. And it seemed like people were still getting the news that these tragedies had happened. And already there were interviews, whether it was Beto O'Rourke, who I think was first out the gate to call the president a white supremacist. And then of course, Twitter was aflame. And it seems to have snowballed from there and culminating in what I thought was the most frustrating moment of the week, which was when the president was at the hospital in Dayton. He gets back on the plane and sees that Joe Biden has, in that time, the president of the hospital, Joe Biden, then engaged in a public speech where he called the president a racist. What is going on? And to say nothing of the fact that these are baseless accusations, certainly the president's not just his comments, but also his actions totally, throw all of that away. But why is that an acceptable game plan in today's Democrat Party? What about that makes them think that that's going to unify the country and help us ensure that these tragedies never happen again? It's really disheartening.
It is, and certainly, and again, I don't want to continue to go on and on about the language, but dropping the F-bombs and everything else, irresponsible with a capital I.
Absolutely. And they do it in the same breath that they accuse the president of doing it. And all we've heard this week from the president is words to say, I'm willing to sit down at the table and have conversations to ensure that no other community feels the pain that so many families are feeling right now. I'm willing to talk about background checks. I'm willing to talk about red flag laws. Let's get Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey on the phone and bring in Lindsey Graham. And all you've heard him talk about all week is saying, I'm willing to do it. And I would say he's talked about it in a more open way than his predecessors, or it feels like there's an opportunity here for change that maybe hasn't been before. And of course, he wants it to be a multi-pronged approach. He wants us to get at mental health and pop culture, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But it seems like he's used so much of his time this week to try and keep the focus where it should be. And these others have just used it to go completely unhinged. And again, the bottom line is we want to try and prevent these tragedies from happening in the future. I think that's what every American wants. There's no one who thinks that this is not an issue happening in their country. And why is it that now, perhaps more than ever, people have rushed to just politicize it? And it seems they've singularly politicized it on President Trump, which of course is completely unfair and out of touch, because this has been an issue in our country long before President Trump was in the Oval Office.
Our great friend Cassie Smedley joining us from the RNC, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's throw out Republicans and Democrats. Let's talk about the damage to the institution of the presidency when you have the media augmenting the crazy, wacky, zany lib message of the president and anyone that supports him as a white supremacist. This is doing damage to the country internally that I don't think that we'll be able to measure for quite some time.
It's a great point, and it's a disheartening point. But yes, for those who don't keep their TVs on all cable channels all day long, like we have to do at my job, you see some of the chyron, the words at the bottom of the screen saying, President racist remarks, President exterminating Latinos. These are phrases that are happening not even on the primetime, quote, opinion shows. This is when you're supposed to still be on the news side of the shows. And then you have people like Chuck Todd who says that the president was not sincere in his comments because they came from a teleprompter. And that made me scratch my head because, of course, President Obama, who was considered this great orator, always spoke from a teleprompter, always spoke from a scripted speech that presumably someone else had written for him or had a heavy hand in writing. So why were those genuine comments, but they're not when they come from President Trump? And it's those types of little comments where they call themselves, straight arbiters of news, and yet they insert this type of commentary into the conversation, which, to your point, is very disheartening, but it also just further serves to divide people who are already on shaky ground. And I always think, and I've tried to do it myself this week, put down the phone, definitely turn off Twitter, try and find a TV show that doesn't relate to news, but maybe better yet, connect with your neighbor and go talk to your coworker instead of just emailing them. Let's reconnect with each other and talk again, because we can't allow these shows and these comments to be our only source of communication in our days. We've got to find other things to talk about. And I think that's what, on the whole, most people are doing. And maybe Washington just needs to take a page from Real America. And how many times have we said that on how many issues?
I'm with you. What do you make of our friends on the Democratic side urging the Senate Majority Leader, now vilifying him for not calling the Senate back for a special session? You've got, all of a sudden massive gun laws. We need to take the guns from everybody. Never mind that the assault weapons ban was proven not to work.
Right.
We take a look at this radical swing from the opposition, if you will, trying to take advantage of these tragedies.
Well, unfortunately, we know that these tragedies are all too common. And this seems that this conversation pops up every single time. And then where does it leave us? People go to their far corners and then they start lobbing names. And, we've seen this play before. And I think Mitch McConnell is right. Let's keep everyone in their states. There's not enough time that people are spending at home talking to their constituents. And they come to D.C. and they get involved in the D.C. bubble. And I think that's where things break down. Let's take this time to really figure out what works. And by the way, as someone who's worked on Capitol Hill, and everybody likes to call it recess when they go home, and yes, certainly the days are a little slower and different than when they're running around the Capitol, but there are a lot of conversations that take place. And oftentimes I think that's when real conversations take place. So I think it's worthwhile to keep people out in the real world for a little bit. And then when they come back to D.C., hopefully they're motivated to have a productive conversation that really gets at the why the things are happening. But certainly when you've got people on the Senate Majority Leader's front lawn and a hashtag Massacre Moscow Mitch is allowed to trend on Twitter, as we're just having this conversation about social media's role in perpetuating vile rhetoric online, I mean, I could see how he's wanting to take down the temperature a little bit before we bring everybody back in. But as we already know, the Manchin Tooley bill is back. Lindsey Graham's working on things. There's also people talking about mental health components. So I think we have a better opportunity to let cooler heads prevail if we give people a minute to just simmer and, again, reconnect with their communities and not get back in the overheated bubble of Washington.
No, that's easier said than done.
Certainly.
You take a look at the president making comments about sleepy Joe Biden. Joe came to town. It was a private fundraiser. What's next as far as the Democratic presidential candidates? We've got another debate in September. Labor Day kicks off this week. They're having pork chops in Iowa. What's next for them? And I know that's a little outside your jurisdiction, but I'm sure you're game planning for them.
Well, we're certainly trying to spotlight all of their gaffes. You, of course, had one with Elizabeth Warren yesterday talking to an Iowa farmer, and she brought all the cameras out thinking it was going to be a great moment. And he said, your Green New Deal would devastate beautiful farm. And by the way, your comment about getting rid of cows, that's not true. That's not how this works. Those cows out there aren't contributing to climate change. And she just goes, So we're very happy to spotlight those moments of reality for the Democrat candidates. Joe Biden had another gaffe yesterday when he very unfortunately said that poor people are just as smart and talented as white children. We're not quite sure where that came from, but these are the moments that while everybody's living their lives, going to work, taking their kids to camp and getting ready for back to school, our folks are watching them to make sure you see that and have a clearer picture of who these candidates really are, not just who they proclaim to be in their glossy TV moment, made for TV moments. But and we'll be right on the debates in Houston as well. We've got our team down there just as we've done for the last two. And the reason for all of that is because you can't count on the media to give a fair look at what they're saying and where they are in these positions. Seems to be pretty one-sided. So we try and go in and utilize all of our resources to not only highlight the other side, but use that to motivate our volunteers and teams on the ground to go out and talk to their neighbors about it, because it's really important that you know where these candidates actually stand on these issues and what the truth is behind so many of these far-left proposals that they keep slapping lipstick on and trying to make look more glamorous than they really are.
Cassie, final question for you here on KIDO Talk Radio. Is there a concern, and this is just a broader question, that all the rhetoric, all the false accusations, white national this, white supremacist that, is just turning people off, and we're going to lose another generation to video games and Sports Center?
Well, it is a very fair concern because we see that just in the ratings on TV. People are already turning it off, tuning it out, because it's not healthy to hear all that kind of stuff, and it seems to be contrary to the lives we lead. But our message back is to say, stop listening to all the rhetoric and look at the results. And when you look at the results, you see certainly with President Trump, with the aid of Republicans, has really offered a lot to so many communities across America. And we can talk through the record low unemployment for African Americans, Hispanics, more women than ever in the workforce. And, of course, you've got the criminal justice reform, which is helping those commute their sentences and come back in the communities and be meaningful contributors to their communities. These are things that haven't happened in so many communities in so long. And so when I look at those results, and I think that's what people certainly should be paying attention to, but more people than we realize are paying attention to. And that's why our approach with the RNC is neighbor to neighbor. And it's not beholden to a campaign commercial or an ad online. Yes, we do some online stuff, but it is largely tens of thousands of people that we're training to go out and talk to people in their community, talk in a specific way about the issues that mean the most to your unique community. That's what's going to help keep our democratic process going, I think, is by keeping that connection. And as we've always said, all politics are local, and it's important to keep it that way and not allow whatever the rhetoric on the national level to overtake that, which I don't think it will.
Cassie Smedley from the RNC, we sure appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, and have a great weekend.
You as well. Kevin Miller in the morning. It is 619-580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to the home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio.
Reason?
Yes, part of the reason.
Part of the reason's on the front end,
yes.
How it all gets produced, and then part of it on the back end
We
in terms of
grow these
doing
large
it.
amounts of commodities that go for fuel or for feed to livestock, which we should less than corn. Cattle should not, ruminants are not designed to eat corn.
Right.
But yet, I would say we shouldn't get rid of, the Green New Deal says we need to get rid of cows.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that because well-managed grasslands where you rotationally graze, all these paddocks, like that system there has about 8 different paddocks. You're actually going to use more CO2 and sequester more carbon because of the regrowth all the time. And yet, that's a permanent pasture. So anyway, my point is we have become so ignorant of the basic principles of biology in food production that we have said we answer them all through technology instead of letting Mother Earth and having respect.
There we have it. Cassie Smedley mentioning this. If you want to see that video, you can go to the Kevin Miller Show Facebook page where we just put that up. And Elizabeth Warren being confronted by an Iowa farmer. And that is the beauty of these primary states. And we saw it. We saw it to a degree when we had the big governor's race. You know, there wasn't a home or a coffee shop where you couldn't get a hold of Congressman Labrador, Tommy Alquist, or Brad Little. Now, in Iowa, New Hampshire, and to a lesser degree, South Carolina, you get to meet these people. You do. You know, the Iowa State Fair is going on, and you've got these candidates pandering to the Iowans or the Iowans, call them what you will, and you get to go up and ask them questions and such. And it's really how America used to be, not so dependent on digital schmidgital, but dependent on that one-on-one communication. I'm sure Elizabeth Warren was not happy with that. Coming up, a good news story from Ford. Do want to remind you, the Spirit of Boise Balloon Classic is just around the corner. Kicks off Wednesday, August 28th. It's going to be a great time. We look forward, once again, Town Square Media, to be a sponsor of this event. It is totally free. You can go to our website, KIDOTalkRadio.com, for details. Do want to thank Channel 2 for the nice feature featuring this program, talking about the Spirit of Boise Balloon Classic. If you're new to the area, it is really a cool place to go and just check it out, especially the Night Glow on Friday nights. By the way, brought to you by our great community partners, Cap Ed Credit Union. Our time is 6:25. Kevin Miller in the morning, traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. I'm Kevin Miller in the morning. This is a great story from Ford. And for those that struggle, and we all struggle to a degree, but, you know, we never know what we have until it's gone, right? We never know what we have until it's gone, whether it's a job is taken from us, whether it's a life experience, whether it's our health, whether it's somebody very special in our lives, right? And a sobering reminder of how precious life is and how blessed we truly are, no matter what our struggles, is when we or a loved one or someone we care about has a medical condition. You want to be humbled, just go hang out in a hospital, right? Or an animal hospital when you're treating your little four-legged family member. All of a sudden, all the powers that we have, it's like our home where we have the latest technology, the big screen television, the computers, the unlimited streaming. I'm ghetto fabulous, and boom, the power goes out. We're slapped back into reality. And it would be nice that the liberal politicians, the Joe Bidens, the Omars, the Tlaibs, you know, the usual suspects, and the devious little libs locally, as they continue to percolate in their secret society, would spend time in a children's ward, spend time helping people, and maybe they do. But nothing is more humbling, and nothing is the cure for being insensitive than dealing with a problem. Here is something cool that Ford Motor Company did. Nearly 2 decades ago, Wesley Ryan sold his beloved 1993 Mustang GT. And you're saying, well, why did he do it? Well, he did that to pay for his wife's cancer treatments. She had cancer. Think about that. Have you seen that commercial? I think it's State Farm or one of them, where the grandfather is about ready to buy his dream car. Then his granddaughter moves in, and instead of buying the car that he's coveted for years, he buys her first car and teaches her how to drive. There are so many stories of inspiration like that we don't hear and see anywhere else. So through a stroke of luck, now remember, this is 2 decades ago, his son found the car for sale back in September. Holy Carfax, Batman. So what his kids did is they decided, you know, we're going to do something for Dad. So they all chipped in to buy it back. Now you're thinking, 20 years, what kind of condition is this 1993 Mustang GT in? Well, you can guess. Unfortunately, the car hadn't been treated very well over the past 17 years and needed lots of work. And anytime you deal with a, well, I don't want Mike Miniger to get mad at me, but you go to the body shop, you're going to pay, right? Anyway, Ford Executive Chairman Bill Ford, that's right, Bill Ford of the Ford family, heard about Ryan's story. So what did he do? Showing class, showing dignity, showing empathy. He reached out to the family and said, look, we're going to restore that muscle car back to its former glory. Plus, add a few modern day goodies. Of course, a 65 Mustang, they don't have the air conditioning, right? Anyway, we're talking about a 93. So Thursday, Ryan was invited to the Ford headquarters in Dearborn and received the keys to his new car. He said to reporters, "Man, we are so blown away. We are so blessed." Think about that. A great story by a car dealer, a car maker that didn't have to do it. So big ups to Ford and the Ford dealers and all who work at Ford. I'm sure Ryan and others are smiling this morning. See, those little stories, shouldn't that be the lead story on the news? Well, Kevin, that's boring. I think it's inspiring. What about you? You're listening to Kevin Miller on your home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie. Your home for Fox News on the radio, live, and I mean live to Capitol Hill. Rachel Sutherland joining us. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Kevin.
Is it happy for a lot of troops pulling out of the Middle East, though?
Well, they may be glad to be home, but the trouble is the Inspector General for the Pentagon has released a report showing that there's been some increased activity in Iraq and Syria among ISIS after they left. So there was a slight troop drawdown in the spring, and the report says that ISIS has been engaging in suicide attacks, burning of crops, assassinations. So they're active. They have not retaken any of that territorial caliphate that was destroyed or retaken by coalition forces. But it's not like they don't want to. So what the Inspector General is doing is sounding alarm and saying that the coalition forces and the Syrian Democratic Forces that are left still need help with training and being equipped to be able to deal with the remnants of ISIS.
Of course, the big concern is this could be the withdrawal of Iraq all over again.
Well, and that's the concern. I mean, everybody looks back to 2003 and the Iraq War, and then when we left, creating a vacuum for ISIS to spring up. I mean, nobody likes dictators, but they do tend to hold down their corners of the world. And when there's not a stable government, it allows these terrorists to be able to spring up and get more active. And so Iraq, Syria is obviously not stable with the civil war been going on for so many years, with the U.S. wanting President Bashar al-Assad out, Russia's backing al-Assad. Syria's just been a mess for a really long time. Iraq's still kind of unstable. So you're looking at a situation where ISIS could have the opportunity to gather, spring up, reintegrate and recoup and try to come back. Now, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was asked about the report the other day. He said he hadn't read it, but he reaffirmed that the Trump administration is very aware of the fact that ISIS still poses a threat, as well as other terrorists around the world.
Rachel Sutherland joining us, KIDO Talk Radio, Fox News Radio. So the Secretary of State is aware of the situation. Switching gears to something we talked about yesterday, this evolving situation in the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, America, Britain, taking a look at putting more assets in that area to curb the Iranians. You disclosed yesterday the crazy, wacky, zany Iranians actually using false GPS to lure more ships in there. Any more movement, any more possibility? I know it's early that we could be getting more people joining that coalition of the willing, if you will.
You know, not so far. I mean, this is disturbing, the idea they're using GPS jammers, trying to lure these ships in. But at this point, as far as the Strait of Hormuz, I don't see a whole lot of difference with the other nations. Germany and France have said they're not going to do that. They're not going to join in. But their minds may be changed if perhaps one of their tankers is confiscated. We do know that Israel will join the U.S.-led coalition in the Gulf there, and I know that the U.S. is urging Japan to join in, but so far it's not clear whether Japan will. Germany rejected the idea. France has not been involved either yet.
Rachel Sutherland joining us. So, Rachel, it looks like Congress will not be coming back, at least the Senate.
That's right. For the August session that Democrats have been calling for in the wake of the shootings in El Paso and Dayton, they were wanting, the Senate to reconvene, to come back and take up these gun control proposals, including these red flag laws, which will allow law enforcement to take guns from people, at least temporarily, if they're deemed a threat. Also expanded background checks. There's been a bill that was actually passed by the House, a bipartisan bill that would expand background checks. and it was bipartisan leaders, calling on Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, to come back in August. He has said that this will wait until September until they reconvene, but he says that they will be front and center. We also know that the NRA president, Wayne LaPierre, has been on the phone with President Trump telling him that his supporters will not like these new proposals, the red flag laws. There have been some passed in several states, Maryland being one. I know the District of Columbia here has one where if someone, a family member or someone's concerned about a person's stability and they have firearms, it would be a fast process. The judge could say, okay, the guns need to go.
And finally, I promise it's short, Rachel, what do you make of the bonehead that showed up at Walmart armed and was shooting a video of himself? Odd.
It is odd, and it's odd that I don't know if he lost his nerve, thank goodness. But then he was arrested. I guess we'll find out more about him, and then the person who actually, I guess, stopped him from leaving until law enforcement could arrive. It's just disturbing. I mean, you hear about these things are popping up almost every day. We had a scare right outside of Washington at USA Today. It turned out really to be nothing, but there was a report that evacuated the building. I think people get skittish in times like these, and it makes sense. And then there's also copycats, people who think, oh, well, this has happened, so I'll just go on and try something. In this case, thankfully, he was not successful.
Rachel, you have a great weekend. Hard working, hard charging. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Rachel Sutherland, boy, she's ready to go. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Sadly, 2 Washington County, Oregon sheriff deputies were shot west of Portland. This was Thursday afternoon. The deputies were responding to a report of a suspicious man trying to break into somebody's cabin. With the details, here is Washington County Sheriff Pat Garrett on KIDO Talk Radio.
He began shooting at them. 2 deputies were shot by the suspect, and multiple TNT members returned fire, injuring the suspect.
Look, if you're thinking about breaking into somebody's house, if you're thinking about firing at the police, being generous here, it is not a good idea.
1 deputy is in serious condition, and a 2nd deputy sustained non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect surrendered after being shot and was transported to an area hospital.
And again, our thoughts and prayers go out to the brave men and women and their families in law enforcement that don't get a lot of respect, that don't get a lot of appreciation. In fact, what was it, those nitwits in New York City that were throwing ice buckets on the police and they thought that was funny? Thankfully, they were arrested, but what does that say? Doesn't say a lot. Okay, the most outrageous story before 7 a.m. here on KIDO Talk Radio. Now, remember the mood that we have in the country. Now, does it translate to you when you go to one of your favorite stores, right? When you go to whatever store you go to, the great people at Winco, whether it's Winco, Walmart, Albertsons, Fred Meyer, Timmy's. Most people go in, and of course, the aisles are getting smaller, or we're getting bigger, or at least I'm getting bigger. And sometimes, depending on what time you go in, it's a hassle, right? But how many people are really afraid to go in when they're buying groceries? Are you afraid to go in when you buy your groceries? Really? I mean, they had us afraid to go to schools many years ago. Now they have us afraid to go to the Walmarts. So let's just say people are on a heightened sense of alert, right? People are on a heightened sense of alert. They're very alert. So you have a man in Springfield, Missouri, was arrested on Thursday after walking into a Walmart heavily armed. Now, a person who didn't wish to be identified happened to be carrying his own firearm and held the man, thankfully, at gunpoint until police arrived. Now, we don't know if this guy needs mental help. Now, initially, I'm thinking to myself, the guy filmed himself. So maybe he was just trying to be provocative. Maybe he was trying to take away your right to keep and bear arms. Maybe, again, he was just trying to, make a point. Or on the other hand, my goodness gracious, maybe he was ready to shoot. So let's take a listen here.
I walked up to the grass and asked him if he was the male inside, and he stated yes, and I drew my weapon, told him to put his hands in the air. He complied, was compliant the whole time.
And there you have it. How do we prevent shootings? Brave people standing up to people that should have better things to do, right?
Hopefully my actions prevented something like El Paso from happening.
Right. Again, here you have a man who saw this person walking around a Walmart with ammunition, vest, weapons, and everything and said, "Not so fast, my friend."
I've been in public safety for a long time, and even though I'm no longer in public safety, I still feel that I can still protect people if I need to, and that was my intention.
There you have it. And, it's so important if you want to carry your weapon, and the beauty of Idaho, thanks to the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. Look, I give Seth, I give Greg Pruitt and others so much credit. I remember when Greg Pruitt came in with Eric McRush and we had a talk and he started this thing. And those folks sacrifice a lot to make sure that people in Idaho have their rights. Isn't that wild? That they have to actually do that, where they go into towns and if they see a sign saying no guns allowed, they go, well, that's against the law. That's against Idaho code. They're not lawyers, but they go in and they fight for people's rights to keep and bear arms. And much to the chagrin of a lot of politicians that have vilified these folks, right? So my point is, and again, we love Independence Indoor Shooting. They have a great concealed carry permit program to get the enhanced conceal and carry. If you're wondering, if you're carrying and you're wondering, man, maybe I should get some training, I would check them out, 576 Guns, iishooting.com, or get yourself trained. See, in Idaho, and it's kind of weird, how long has the Boise Braves been around? And now, they're changing the name to the Boise Brave. Isn't it weird that now all of a sudden schools in Idaho are getting politically correct? They're getting rid of their Native American mascots because they're offensive, yet they weren't offensive 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There is an element moving in. Not all people from the West are bad. Not all people from the former Golden State are bad, but you do have a significant liberal element primarily emanating around the city of Boise, and you have their sleeper cells throughout the Treasure Valley that are, making an impact. It's not cool to be conservative. It's not cool to be a Republican. Well, you want to be a Republican, but you don't want to be that type of Republican. That's why it's so important to practice, to shoot, to train, whether you call our friends at Independence Indoor Shooting, 576 Guns, or somebody else. I know many of the folks that train people. They are all good people. And if you ever need some good reinforcement, go talk to those people that have the shooting ranges, that have the tactical indoor facilities that make a difference. They're not wishy-washy. Going back to this, though, I love this guy.
I've been in public safety for a long time, and even though I'm no longer in public safety, I still feel that I can still protect people if I need to, and that was my intention.
He chooses not to be identified in the social media stardom universe. Imagine how many followers he could have gotten on Facebook and Instagram. God bless this young man. And thankfully, we'll have more people that will be allowed and are allowed to protect us from the bad and protect ourselves, right? It is our responsibility. Kevin Miller on your home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio.
And the other thing we should do is we should challenge these students. We should challenge students in these schools to have advanced placement programs in these schools. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids.
Yeah. Our next president right there, Joseph Biden. Bad call, Joseph. We'll get your reaction to that latest blunder. I guess there are no poor white kids. Anyway, some more good news here. It's always fun on Friday. We're having the good news as we're getting ready for the weekend, unless you're like myself and Ray Amaya, you'll be working this weekend. However, I don't know really how to say this, but big ups to the Albertsons Corporation. As we predicted yesterday, and we thought that they would. They did the right thing. You might have heard Maggie talk about this at the half hour. And if you haven't, it's all over the story. It was breaking news last night that Albertsons has dropped their lawsuit against Granny C's Bakery and the Growler store. I guess that, that's the type of, containers you get. Well, anyway, it was a loser for the corporation. It was a loser for a company that prides itself on its attachment to the community, that was founded by Joe Albertson many years ago, and always talks about its community ties. Was it 80 years in the Treasure Valley? Some sort of incredible record, and is in a huge battle, not only locally with the employee-owned and operated Winco Corporation, with Walmart, with Costco, with Fred Meyer, who I guess, somebody said one day Fred Meyer will change its name because of their major company. I don't know. I do know this, though, that we all make mistakes. And big ups to the people at Albertsons that said, look, this lawsuit against Granny C's Bakery, essentially they were trying to sue the bakery because the bakery existed. The bakery, if you look at the legal interpretation, they didn't violate it. Now Albertsons is suing the landlord. I don't know. Is it really necessary? Okay, these major corporations, and I understand we don't live in a socialist system. Well, we do with Medicare, Medicaid, and everything else. However, we won't go there. But these major corporations, whether you're a bakery, a flower shop, anything else, they try to get that business. And I understand that. My wife owns a flower shop. She works very hard. She's like a lot of people in that industry. They work Saturdays and Sundays. And you have Albertsons, Fred Meyer, they have their own flowers and this, that, and the other, and all sorts of wonderful things. But the idea that a multi-million-dollar corporation would feel so threatened by a local bakery is absurd. You go into some of these places, and I was at a food place yesterday, and Jeff the Suit was with me. Jeff the Suit wanted to buy a high-priced $13 sandwich. And the guy goes, I don't make the sandwich anymore. And then Jeff the Suit complained, and he made the sandwich. But you can't get the same quality service that you get with the local people, right? So it was a good move by Albertsons to piece out of this thing and to move on and get back to competing and get back to reestablishing its already deep and incredible local ties. So all's well that ends well. Let's hope so. And if not, we'll be watching. 6:58 with Kevin Miller in the morning. Currently 67, thankfully, in Star, Idaho. Traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time, or wherever you're going, Dave. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Coming up next, the latest from Fox News and more inside the battle to keep your right to bear arms. It's happening. We'll tell you next.